So now we're going to look at what's involved in soldering. I'm going to repair this guitar cord that has a broken connector at one end. The most important part of soldering any replacement connector is putting the connector casing on first. Otherwise you get all done and then this is sitting there. So we'll put this on. This is a plastic insulating sleeve. And here's a slightly used 1/4-inch foam plug we'll use. First thing is to strip the insulation off the wire. And this has a wrapped shield and also a foil internal shield. I've had these tools for about 40 years and they still work perfectly. I think I bought these around 1970 or so. Notice I'm holding this here so that the wire, I'm twisting the shield, but we don't want it to twist tightly around the inner conductor, or when we solder it later that will heat and melt, possibly melt through. So this is going to attach right around there, and it looks like we need to cut this right around here. We'll do the same thing. We're going to twist this so it behaves more like a unified whole. Now also I should point out this is a Weller soldering iron. This is a great iron. I've had this for a very long time. And this is a small tip for soldering small things like connectors. I also have this much larger tip for soldering large things. And when I have something really large to solder, I'll use that and this cheap Radio Shack soldering iron, and I'll use both of them together to get something hot enough. That's not something I often need, but it's worth having too. And we use a sponge that's lightly wetted to keep the tip clean. Now the first thing I'm going to do is tin the conductor here to make it like a solid piece of wire so it's easier to deal with and it won't fall apart. Now we can loop this lightly. When soldering, it's important to have not only a good electrical connection, but also a solid mechanical connection. It's important not to wiggle the wire while the solder is drying, otherwise it'll give a bad connection. Well, the next step is to attach the ground wire. We can cut off the excess here. Again, this wants to be squeezed to make a mechanical connection as well as electrical. And then the last thing is to squeeze this clamp so it holds the wire insulation. And again, wait a couple of seconds for it to cool down so you can touch it, and so that it won't melt through the insulation. And there we go. It's all done, and the plastic insulating sleeve prevents this part from touching the inside of the metal case. And there's our completed wire. Another common soldering job is repairing circuit boards, and this circuit board here is typical of something you might find in a recording console. And in this case, I'm going to replace this capacitor here. Now, the tools are slightly different for this. We're going to use what's called a solder sucker. And this is a spring-loaded suction cup. And when you snap it like this, it sucks solder out of the connecting holes. And we'll also maybe need to use this solder wick. This is a braided copper wire, and it's impregnated with rosin, which helps suck up the solder from the connection. But first we'll start with the solder sucker, because that will get rid of most of the solder. So I'll arm it. Take the iron. And look at that. Gotta shake the pieces out so they don't fall back onto the board. Now we'll do the same with the other one. Now, this may be enough to get the capacitor out. No, it's not. So now let's try using the solder wick as well. There's little bits of solder. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but there's a little bit still right around the hole here. And around this hole as well. And I believe this will now come right out. And there it came right out. All right, now we're going to put a capacitor back in there. And this type of capacitor is polarized, and it has a plus and a minus. The minus is marked, and that aligns with this black line here. And now we'll solder that back in. And there you go. Good as new.